Hello, Crescent Heights. Happy Tuesday. I hope that you had a great break and got some time to relax and spend time with family. This is Mrs. Stahl, and today I'm going to share a book called Extra Yarn. It's by Mac Barnett, and it's illustrated by John Klassen. And what got my attention was this seal on here. It's called the Caldecott Honor Book. Caldecott was an author, and it's a very high honor to get a Caldecott medal. So we'll see if we like it. Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and she knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still extra yarn. I'm thinking Mars must be her pet. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. Wow, that's a lot of yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone, Annabelle. That sweater of yours is a terrible distraction, and I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." I'm not crazy about him. He doesn't sound very kind. But it turned out she could, and she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. Wow, I'm thinking she is super duper kind because he was not nice to her, but yet she still did something very nice for him, didn't she? I love how the illustrator still has the yarn connecting all of the sweaters. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for the other animals too. Soon Annabelle will run out of yarn, but it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. Think for a minute, what do you think is going to change in that little town? Why do you think it's going to change? What did Annabelle do to make this town change? News spread of this remarkable girl who had never run out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. $2,000,000, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10,000,000, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. Why do you think that Annabelle wouldn't sell the yarn? Why did she want to keep it? And why do you think the archduke wanted to buy it? So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. Back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted its lid and he looked inside. What do you think he saw in that box? His mustache quivered, it shivered, it trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." The archduke hurled the box out of the window. Turn to someone near you sometime today and tell them the word hurled. Use that in a sentence. What does that really mean when you hurl something? But, boy, that author really wanted me to think, because they used this whole big page to just put one word. The box and Annabelle. Do you remember her dog's name? It turned out she was. And there are the cats wearing sweaters, and the trees even have sweaters. My goodness. So that was Extra Yarn.